The story opens with Diddy sitting in a quiet room, pacing and breathing heavy, knowing his entire world is slipping out of his hands. These new videos that have surfaced show him in moments he never wanted the public to see. They show the panic, the fear, the control he believed he still had, and the collapse of everything he tried to hide behind money, power, and image. These clips, now inside the new Netflix documentary, reveal him in a moment where he is calling his lawyer, desperate, stressed, and fully aware that the people he once controlled no longer fear him. For the first time, people are watching him not as the confident mogul he always portrayed, but as a man terrified that the truth is finally catching up to him. And this is where 50 Cent enters the story, because he is the one who helped bring these private videos into the public eye, pushing a narrative that Diddy never expected to lose control of. The documentary has become the #1 show on Netflix in the United States and is built around never-before-seen recordings and behind-the-scenes footage that paint a very different picture of the music mogul who once bragged about being untouchable. The video of Diddy on the phone, pacing and complaining that he is tired of everything happening to him, shows that he wasn't the strong figure he pretended to be. He talks about how he has been a superb client to his lawyers, how he jumped on a plane, and how he is tired of waiting for the next shoe to drop. His voice cracks slightly as he talks about the fear that someone is going to hit him with another lawsuit or indictment at any moment. It shows a man who is not leading his empire, but begging privately for someone to help him manage the collapse. This kind of footage is shocking, not just because it is personal, but because Diddy claimed it was stolen. He insisted these videos were private moments, never meant for the public, and that Netflix should not have had access to them. But Netflix stood firm, saying they obtained everything legally. Meanwhile, 50 Cent refused to reveal how he got the videos. In his interview, he simply said that journalists don't reveal sources, and he wasn't going to reveal his either. His smirk said everything. It showed that he knows exactly what he's doing and that the content in his hands is something Diddy never thought would escape his control. The documentary does not just show the fall of a man facing legal problems, it shows the full arc of someone who built an entire career on image, branding, and narrative control. Diddy mastered how to shape public opinion. Throughout his career, he always made sure his fans saw him the way he wanted to be seen. From his rise with Bad Boy Records, to his relationship with artists, to the glamour of fame, he made sure the world believed he was the king of hip-hop culture. But the documentary pulls back that curtain and shows that behind every photo, every party, every staged moment, there was someone who was constantly managing how he looked, what he said, and who he allowed close to him. And when allegations started dropping, he used the same strategy: try to control the story. The video shows him advising his lawyer that they need to manage public communication, control news cycles, and shape what potential jurors will think. He talks like a man running a PR campaign instead of defending himself in a criminal case. And this is what the documentary highlights: the lengths Diddy went to protect his narrative, even when serious accusations were hanging over his head. The director of the documentary explains that Diddy has always been a master of marketing, a master of controlling his own story, and someone who knows exactly how to shift public opinion. That talent didn't disappear when he was facing these lawsuits. It intensified. In the footage, he talks about pushing messages that would influence people watching the news, people scrolling online, and even people who might one day sit in a jury. Everything had to go through him, and his fear didn't come from believing he was innocent. It came from watching the narrative slip out of his hands. But the documentary doesn't just focus on the legal cases. It also gives space to the victims, both men and women, who say they experienced abuse. The director makes it clear that gender does not matter when someone is a victim. She wanted to show the range of accusations, the emotional weight behind them, and the way these stories were overshadowed for years by the headlines that focused only on the most dramatic controversies. Many of these people never had the chance to speak freely without being drowned out by Diddy's media machine.
The documentary gives them the chance to put their stories in context, sharing what happened in detail, away from the noise. The documentary reveals another emotional moment where Diddy reacts to one of the lawsuits filed by Don Richard, a former artist he once worked closely with. When he learns that she filed legal claims against him, his entire tone changes. His voice tightens with anger, frustration, and disbelief. He talks about how someone who worked with him, someone in his musical group, could suddenly accuse him of such things. His behavior shifts from fear to rage, and it becomes clear that he felt betrayed by someone he once considered part of his inner circle. This moment exposes his ego and shows that the lawsuits weren't just legal problems for him. They were challenges to his personal pride. Another powerful part of the documentary comes from Kurt Barrow, a former Bad Boy Records co-founder who knew Diddy during the early days. Barrow helped shape the label, but later had a major falling out with Diddy. In the documentary, he talks about Diddy trying to act like a street gangster even though he wasn't one. He says Diddy wanted to be a strong man, wanted to be feared, wanted to act tough, but didn't have the real background to be that person. He describes Diddy as a paper gangster, someone who acted tough only in places where he was protected by power, money, or his team. He says Diddy was trying to be both an industry giant and a street figure at the same time, but he wasn't built for either role honestly. This contrast between image and reality is a central theme in the documentary, and 50 Cent uses these testimonies to show that Diddy's mysterious behavior wasn't an accident, it was a pattern. People in the hip-hop world have been talking behind the scenes for years about the way Diddy treated people, the way he tried to dominate, and the way he always kept others beneath him. But few have spoken on camera until now. Despite the decades-long tension between 50 and Diddy, 50 Cent makes it clear that he never wanted to hurt Diddy physically or personally. He even hired Diddy's sons for different shows. He says their beef was more of a public rivalry, not a real personal war. But when he watched the way other people described Diddy's behavior, the danger, the ego, the manipulation, he understood why so many people viewed Diddy as someone who could harm others. The documentary also revisits major controversies from Diddy's past, the incidents that shaped hip-hop history and raised questions that never fully disappeared. One early case involved a tragic event where people were hurt and killed. And while Diddy was linked to the situation, he was not charged with one-on-one violence. Then there's the infamous nightclub shooting with Jennifer Lopez, where Shine ended up taking the fall while Diddy walked away with his reputation relatively intact. The documentary doesn't just retell these events. It examines how Diddy seemed to survive situation after situation, while people around him suffered consequences. It lets viewers piece together whether it was luck, manipulation, or something much deeper. The documentary also covers the Tupac and Biggie timeline, focusing on the relationships between Diddy, Biggie, and Tupac. Many people in the film suggest that Diddy may have had deeper involvement than fans realized, though no evidence has ever proven this in court. With Keffe D's trial scheduled years in the future, these discussions take on a new weight. The director makes it clear that she isn't accusing Diddy of these murders. She is presenting testimonies, past statements, and the complex relationships that influenced the hip-hop culture. At one point in the documentary, a juror speaks about the New York trial. This is important because it reminds viewers that Diddy beat major charges. The juror explains that even though there were disturbing details in the case, the government simply couldn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Diddy was guilty of the RICO charges. They believed the prosecutors overcharged and made the case too big and too aggressive. The juror stands firmly behind their decision, saying they did not see enough evidence to convict on the serious charges. The documentary shows that this was a complicated case, and even though survivors felt unheard, the legal system followed its own rules. As the interview moves forward, 50 Cent says something powerful. He points out that even though Diddy beat the big charges, the outcome was still a victory for him. Serving 50 months instead of spending his life in prison is something many people didn't expect. But at the same time, Diddy is still the only person locked up for the specific charges relating to hiring and transporting male escorts, something that opened an entire new conversation in the industry. The documentary doesn't try to tell viewers how to judge Diddy. Instead, it lays out patterns, stories, old footage, and new evidence. It shows the control he once had, the fear he lived with privately, and the collapse of an empire that once seemed impossible to break. It shows the people who were hurt, the people who were silenced, and the people who finally decided they wanted to speak. And with 50 Cent pushing the project forward, it becomes clear that this wasn't just a documentary, it was a reckoning.
This contrast between image and reality is a central theme in the documentary, and 50 Cent uses these moments to expose Diddy in a way that cuts deeper than any lawsuit or headline ever could. Because when you strip away the mansion tours, the celebrity friends, the red carpets, and the glossy interviews, what remains is a man who built an entire empire on fear, control, and performance. And now that the performance is breaking down, the fear is showing through every frame of these leaked videos. 50 Cent understands that once the public sees the real, unfiltered version of someone who spent decades hiding behind fame, that person loses the one thing they depended on most, the illusion. And 50 knows exactly how to weaponize that illusion. He knows that showing people the real Diddy is more damaging than any diss, any Instagram post, or any trolling he's ever done. The documentary shows how these never-before-seen recordings expose the pattern behind Diddy's behavior, a pattern of control, manipulation, and entitlement. They highlight moments where he tried to dictate what stories journalists could run, how artists should speak about him, and how the public should interpret any situation involving his name. Every crisis he faced in the past was handled through PR spin and media pressure, not accountability. But these leaked videos destroy that shield. They show him scrambling, calling his lawyer like a man who finally understands he can't buy his way out of every problem. They show him complaining about being tired, overwhelmed, and scared. And the more he talks, the more it becomes clear that the power he once held over everyone around him has evaporated. Meanwhile, 50 Cent shows no sympathy. In his interview, he explains that he simply wants the truth out because people deserve to know what has been happening behind the scenes for years. He doesn't claim to be a hero. He doesn't claim to be a savior. He just says he wants transparency, and yet everyone can see that there is something personal in the way he delivers these receipts. Diddy humiliated artists, threatened people, and controlled narratives for decades. Now someone bigger than his influence, louder than his reputation, and more fearless than his connections is standing in front of him. 50 Cent is using the same weapons Diddy used on others, exposure, humiliation, and public pressure, and turning them back on him. And the public is watching it unfold with full attention. The documentary becomes even more revealing when it dives into the culture surrounding Diddy's empire. Former employees talk about how everyone was expected to protect the image at all costs. They weren't allowed to speak about what they saw. They weren't allowed to question his behavior. Some describe the environment as intense, chaotic, and unpredictable, especially when Diddy felt cornered or angry. They explain moments where he lashed out, moments where he used fear to keep people loyal, and moments where he surrounded himself with yes men who would protect his name no matter what. These stories add context to the leaked footage and show that the panic people see in the new videos didn't come out of nowhere. It was the collapse of a structure he built to keep everyone silent. What makes everything even more shocking is that the documentary includes interviews with insiders who say they always knew something wasn't right. They talk about the strange behavior, the late-night calls, the mood swings, the secrecy, and the way everything revolved around Diddy's emotional state. They describe how everyone walked on eggshells because one wrong move could end their jobs or their entire careers. And now that these old videos are out, those same insiders are finally able to say publicly what they witnessed behind closed doors. For years, those whispers had nowhere to go. Now, thanks to Netflix and 50 Cent, they're being broadcast to millions. The documentary continues building toward a picture of a man who wanted absolute control but could never control himself.
Former artists explain how they felt pressured, how they were pushed into uncomfortable situations, and how Diddy used his power to blur boundaries that should have never been crossed. These testimonies aren't sensationalized. They're calm, steady, and spoken by people who carried the weight of these experiences for years. Viewers can hear the pain in their voices. They can see the relief on their faces now that they're finally being heard. And this emotional honesty stands in direct contrast to Diddy's private videos where he is trying to manipulate narratives and protect his image. The documentary closes this portion with a powerful comparison. The Diddy the world applauded and the Diddy the victims describe. The shiny award show host, the charming businessman, the industry mogul, versus the man pacing in a private room, sweating, calling his lawyer, terrified that everything is slipping out of his grip. That contradiction is the heart of the entire story. And 50 Cent knows exactly how to weaponize that illusion. He knows that showing people the real Diddy is more damaging than any diss, any Instagram post, or any trolling he's ever done.